Hi, everyone. Welcome to Organic Science, a segment curated by the Organic Guy. And with a little help from AI, we're turning hidden, hard to digest organic and sustainable farming research into bite sized, brain friendly insights you can use daily. Today, we're asking, can eating organic lower your risk of type 2 diabetes? Spoiler alert, the science says yes, and it's more powerful than you think.
Mm,
You actually shared a really interesting piece of research with us, a study that dug into this very question of organic food and type 2 diabetes risk.
that's right. Yeah, we've been looking at the findings from a significant study, the Nutrient Santé study conducted over in France.
Okay.
It followed over 33,000 adults, quite a large group,
Wow.
between 2014 and 2019. And what's particularly valuable, I think, is that it specifically investigated the connection between how much organic food people ate and their likelihood of, well, developing type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And importantly, it did a pretty thorough job trying to control for other factors, things that could also influence those outcomes.
So it wasn't just a quick snapshot then. This was tracking people over time, their diets, how much organic stuff they ate, and then seeing who actually developed type 2 diabetes years later.
Exactly. A prospective cohort study.
And like you said, they really tried to account for all the other things going on in someone's life, right? Things that might affect diabetes risk anyway.
Right.
So, our goal today really is to understand what the study found, what it uncovered, and what it might mean for you listening, for your own health choices.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
What was the main thing? The core finding that jumped out from the Nutrient Santé study.
Well, the core finding was quite compelling. They found a clear inverse relationship,
Meaning,
meaning basically the more organic food the participants reported eating, the lower their chances seemed to be of developing type 2 diabetes.
cool.
And to put a number on it, which always helps, those who ate the most organic food, the highest quintile, they called it,
Yeah.
showed a significant 35% lower risk compared to those who ate the least. Wow, a 35% reduction. That sounds like a potentially substantial benefit just from, like, how the food is grown.
That's what the association suggests, yes.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just an all or nothing thing either, top versus bottom.
Right, you mentioned it was more gradual.
Exactly. The researchers also calculated that for every 5% increase in the proportion of organic food in someone's diet,
Okay.
they saw a corresponding 3% lower risk of type 2 diabetes.
Huh. So even smaller shifts towards organic could potentially add up then.
That's the implication, yes.
Yeah.
Even making relatively small changes might be beneficial according to this data.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because my first thought is, well, hold on. People who choose organic foods probably just eat healthier overall, right? More fruits, vegetables, less processed stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Did this study manage to sort of tease apart the effect of organic food itself from just having a generally healthy lifestyle?
That's a really critical question. And yeah, the researchers put a lot of effort into addressing that exact point. They statistically adjusted their findings. They accounted for a whole range of factors,
Hmm.
potential confounders.
Like what sort of things?
Oh, the usual suspects. Things like age, education level, income, how much people exercised, whether they smoked or drank alcohol, any pre-existing medical conditions.
Okay, so the standard lifestyle and demographic stuff.
Precisely. And crucially, they also factored in the overall nutritional quality of the participants' diets. They used a scoring system based on French dietary guidelines.
Ah,
You can
okay.
think of that score as like how well their diet lined up with general healthy eating advice, whether the food was organic or not.
Right, right. So comparing apples to apples, or at least trying to, and even after accounting for someone already having a really healthy diet pattern, the link between eating organic and lower diabetes risk, it's still held up.
It did, yes. And what's also quite interesting is they took it another step. They adjusted for body mass index, BMI.
Ah,
Well, doing that additional adjustment, it did weaken the association slightly, made it a little less strong, but it still remains statistically significant.
gotcha. So that hints that maybe the benefit isn't just about organic food eaters being slimmer, perhaps. There might be something else going on.
Exactly. It suggests the potential benefits might be, at least partly, independent of body weight itself.
Okay, so it's starting to look like there might be something specific about the organic food itself contributing here. Now, you mentioned they broke down the types of food too, plant-based versus animal-based organic foods.
Yes, they did. And this is where the findings get a bit more nuanced, a bit more specific. They observed that this inverse association, the link to lower diabetes risk was primarily driven by eating organic plant-based foods.
Ah, interesting. So fruits, vegetables, grains.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When they looked specifically at the proportion of organic food within just the plant products people ate, they saw a similar trend. It was maybe slightly less strong, but still there, still leaning towards a protective effect.
That's fascinating. So it seems choosing organic apples or organic broccoli or organic bread might be more strongly linked to this potential benefit than, say, choosing organic meat or organic milk.
That seems to be the implication from this particular study, yes.
Hmm.
They didn't find a statistically significant association between eating organic animal-based foods and lower T2D risk in the overall group.
Huh.
And there was also a really intriguing little detail, kind of a curveball, when they looked closely at the organic plant food groups.
Yeah.
The group that ate the fourth highest amount, not the absolute top group, but the one just below it, actually seemed to have a slightly lower risk than the very highest group.
Really? That's weird. So more isn't always better in this case.
Well, it wasn't a huge difference, and it's just one finding, but it does raise some interesting questions, doesn't it? Maybe there's a threshold, or maybe other dietary patterns come into play in those very, very high organic consumption groups, something for future research to definitely explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Those little nuances are always where the next questions pop up. What about different groups within the study? Did they see these same patterns across, say, men and women, or different income levels?
They did find some variations there, too. The protective association, it seemed more noticeable in women compared to men,
Okay.
and also it appeared stronger in people who already had healthier diets overall, those with higher scores on that French Dietary Guideline Index we mentioned.
Ah, so people already eating a lot of plants, for instance.
Exactly. It suggests that for those already eating a generally plant-rich diet, choosing organic within that diet might offer an additional layer of benefit, potentially.
That kind of lines up with the stronger link for plant-based organic foods overall, doesn't it?
It does seem consistent, yeah. They also looked at income. Interestingly, the statistically significant links were mainly seen in the lower and higher income groups in their specific analysis, not so much in the middle.
That's specific.
It is. And another really thought-provoking observation, though it wasn't statistically significant, so we have to be cautious.
Okay.
They saw a slight increase in T2D risk among the men who consumed organic food. Very slight and not conclusive, but it contrasts sharply with the strong protective link seen in women.
Whoa, really? An increase for men, even a slight? That's unexpected.
It is. And it really highlights that there could be some complex, maybe sex-specific mechanisms at play here that we just don't understand yet. Definitely needs more investigation.
Absolutely. So, okay, the picture is getting clearer. Organic plant foods seem key, maybe especially for women, possibly layered onto an already healthy diet. Which brings us to the big question. Why? What could be causing this? What are the possible mechanisms?
Right. The study authors discussed several plausible biological reasons. One of the main hypotheses revolves around pesticides, or rather, the lack of them in organic food.
Lower pesticide residues, you mean?
Exactly. They pointed to reports, like from the European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, showing significantly fewer synthetic pesticide residues in organic produce compared to conventional.
Okay, that makes sense. We know organic farming restricts most synthetic pesticides.
Right. And the potential issue here is that many of these pesticides aren't just inert. They can interact with our bodies. The study specifically mentions their potential to act as endocrine disruptors.
Endocrine disruptors, those are chemicals that mess with our hormones.
So, correct. They can interfere with our hormonal systems, which, as you know, are crucial for regulating metabolism, blood sugar control, insulin sensitivity, all central to type 2 diabetes.
So things involved in how our body handles sugar?
Precisely. They mentioned some older pesticides like certain organochlorines, which are now banned in Europe but have historical links to T2D risk.
Yeah.
But also they pointed to currently used pesticides like organophosphates, pyrethroids, even neonicotinoids.
And there's evidence these can affect blood sugar.
The researchers cited experimental studies, lab-based work, suggesting that these types of pesticides could indeed play a role in messing with glucose regulation and potentially promoting insulin resistance.
So the thinking is, choose organic, reduce exposure to these potential disruptors, potentially lower your diabetes risk. That's one major pathway. What else?
Another possibility they considered involves antioxidants. It's pretty well documented that organic plant-based foods often have higher concentrations of certain beneficial compounds, like some antioxidants carotenoids were mentioned as an example.
And antioxidants help fight Oxidative stress.
Exactly. And oxidative stress is increasingly seen as a factor that contributes to the development of type 2 diabetes. So more antioxidants from organic plants could potentially offer some protection that way.
Okay, that fits with the general eat your antioxidants advice.
Mhm.
Makes sense. Anything else?
They also briefly touched on fatty acids, specifically the idea that organic animal products might have different fatty acid profiles, potentially higher levels of beneficial omega-3 fatty acids.
Right, omega-3s are generally seen as good for insulin sensitivity, too.
They are. But, as we already discussed, this study didn't actually find a significant link between organic animal food consumption and lower diabetes risk overall. So, while the fatty acid profile difference might exist, it didn't seem to be the main driver of the results they saw in this particular cohort.
Gotcha. So the pesticide and antioxidant angles seem like stronger contenders based on their findings, especially the plant food link.
That seems fair to say based on their discussion, yes.
Now, we circled back to this earlier, but let's nail it down. People eating organic often have healthier diets overall. The study tried to figure out, is the benefit just because they eat more veggies and less junk, or is the organic aspect itself doing something extra?
Yes, this was a really crucial piece of their analysis. And they did find that, yes, higher organic consumers tended to have healthier overall diet scores, higher adherence to those French guidelines. No surprise there. But their analysis suggested the benefits linked to organic food went beyond just that general healthiness. They did something called a mediation analysis.
Okay, what's
Right.
that mean in simple terms?
Basically, they tried to statistically estimate how much of the lower diabetes risk in the high organic group could be explained just by the fact they also ate a healthier pattern overall,
Okay.
and how much seemed to be a separate direct effect of choosing the organic versions of those foods.
And what did they find?
Their estimates suggested that while the healthy diet pattern definitely played a role, it explained maybe up to about a third, like 32% of the reduced risk in the highest organic group.
Hmm.
There was also what appeared to be a direct effect of organic food consumption itself. They estimated this direct effect accounted for reducing T2D risk by around 28% in that same top group.
Wow. So nearly as much impact potentially coming directly from the organic choice itself, separate from just eating more salad.
That's what their statistical modeling suggests, yes. It implies it's not just about eating more healthy foods. The way those foods are produced organically versus conventionally might have its own independent impact on diabetes risk, according to this study.
That's quite a significant finding if it holds up. But, as always, we need that balanced perspective. Studies always have limitations, right? What did the researchers themselves flag?
Good point. Always important. They were clear that because this is an observational study, they're observing patterns, not doing a controlled intervention.
Right, not telling one group to eat organic and another not to.
Exactly. So they can't definitively prove cause and effect. They can't say eating organic causes lower risk, only that it's strongly associated. There's always a chance some other unmeasured factor, something they didn't account for, is actually responsible.
The old correlation versus causation issue.
That's the one. They also noted that the people who volunteered for Nutrinet Santé, they tend to be more health conscious than the average person in France. So the findings might not perfectly generalize to the entire population. Maybe the effect is different in less health conscious groups.
Fair enough. And what about the time frame? You said 2014, 2019 follow-up. Is that long enough for diabetes?
It's a decent follow-up, about 4 years on average for the diabetes outcome. But you're right, type 2 diabetes can develop over a much longer period.
So could someone already be heading towards diabetes, maybe undiagnosed, and then decide to eat more organic food? Reverse causality.
That's definitely a theoretical possibility with relatively shorter follow-ups. However, the researchers did try to address this. They ran sensitivity analyses where they excluded anyone diagnosed with diabetes in the first couple of years of the study.
Ah, okay.
And they said the results were pretty similar. That provides a bit more confidence that the observed association isn't just due to people changing their diet after the disease process had already started.
Right, that strengthens the findings a bit. Okay, so let's try and wrap this all up. If we boil it down, what's the core message, the key takeaway from this deep dive into the Nutrinet Santé study?
I think the key takeaway is that this large, well-conducted prospective study provides pretty compelling evidence suggesting an inverse association, a link between eating organic food, particularly the plant-based kinds, and having a lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes, especially, it seems, in women.
It really adds another layer to that conversation about food choices and long-term health, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And it emphasizes that maybe the quality of our food, including how it's produced, could have pretty significant implications for preventing chronic diseases like diabetes. It's not just what we eat, but potentially how it got to our plate.
And just to be clear, while the research is really promising, points towards a potential benefit, the researchers themselves, and we should echo this, say we need more research, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is one large study in a specific population. We need further studies in different populations, different countries, different settings to see if these findings hold true elsewhere.
And more work on the why as well.
Definitely. More experimental research, both in labs and maybe even controlled human trials if possible, to really pin down those biological mechanisms. Is the pesticides, the antioxidants, something else entirely, or a combination? That's crucial to fully understand what's going on.
Okay, so the bottom line seems to be, while maybe switching your whole diet to organic isn't the single magic bullet for preventing type 2 diabetes, nothing ever is.
Right. Diet is complex.
But this research strongly suggests it could be a more impactful piece of your overall health strategy than perhaps we previously thought, particularly focusing on those organic fruits, vegetables, and grains. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What other unexpected benefits might be hiding within our everyday food choices, and maybe what small shifts could you experiment with yourself to potentially unlock them?